A 7.6 magnitude earthquake has struck Indonesia. The earthquake was centred in the Banda Sea in eastern Indonesia. Indonesian officials have issued, well, they did, a tsunami warning in several areas which are now being evacuated. Tremors were felt as far away as the Northern Territory, which lasted over a minute.
The 7.6 earthquake that we recorded this morning just before 3 a.m. local time for Darwin is pretty significant, as it's the largest that we've recorded in that area since 2010. So it's no wonder that a lot of people have felt it across Australia.
Joining me live is Martin van Kranendonk, Professor at the University of New South Wales, specialising in geology. Thanks so much for your time, Professor. So we are hearing reports that there is some damage to some buildings in some Indonesian islands, but no reports of damage in Darwin where it was felt. But still, a rude shock when you think when this occurs after 3 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely. It must be pretty unsettling to literally have your world rocked by an earthquake. Especially up in Darwin, which is pretty quiet, tectonically very far away from that active ring of fire where the earthquake happened. So it just shows the power of that earthquake that happened early this morning. But thankfully, it was located very deep down in the earth. And so the energy didn't really transfer up to the surface and cause a tsunami, and thankfully just limited damage so far.
Yeah, so 90 kilometres down, that is, on geology terms, quite deep, is it?
It is, yeah. That's towards the base of the sort of earthquake zones that we get. They can get deeper, but it's the shallow ones that you really have to watch out for. They're the ones that can literally move the bottom of the ocean floor and move the ocean basin on top, and so create those tsunami waves that can be so devastating in addition to the earthquake. So when you get that kind of a situation of a shallow earthquake, it can be that double whammy, the actual effects of the earthquake itself, and then the waves that can come rushing in, sometimes from thousands of kilometers away. So yeah, this time we were very lucky.
Absolutely. Well, the Bureau of Meteorology has decided not to issue a tsunami warning for this particular earthquake, but this is a region, as you say, on the ring of fire. So it is quite active, would you say?
Absolutely. There are volcanoes throughout that Indonesian archipelago of islands and earthquakes quite regularly. And, you know, one of the challenges for geoscience is we're not really able to predict exactly when an earthquake is going to happen. We know, the locations around the world, and we know roughly how often they might occur on sort of hundreds of years timescale. So we can predict sort of, within a little while, but not to the precise time where we can actually, save people's lives. So it's really an act and react kind of response that we have at the moment. And a tsunami warning is a good thing to get out early and then retract, because it'll at least make people aware of the danger. And then if it doesn't happen, safe and sound.
Considering that we are an island nation, are we quite exposed to tsunamis, or are we quite far enough away from the edges of these tectonic plates that it doesn't pose as much of a risk, say, the closer you get to the Pacific Ring of Fire, for example?
Well, you're absolutely right. We have a huge coastline, and of course we have our major cities on the coast, so we'd be worried if tsunamis were very common. They have occurred in the geological past, and of course from that northern area specifically, that northern and northwestern coastline is exposed to tsunamis should they happen in the right kind of environment. So that area definitely needs to have some kind of tsunami emergency protocols in place, and I'm sure they do. But thankfully, those really big and destructive earthquakes are really quite uncommon. But as we know, we've been talking about these 1 in a 100-year events for floods and for storms, and we're seeing them more and more. And earthquakes commonly come in sort of swarms, because once you release the energy from one part of the plate that's kind of jammed together, it can result in other earthquakes propagating off. We've heard that there have been up to 4 aftershocks, but they're generally quite small and haven't created those tremors that we felt on the first earthquake earlier this morning.
So you don't think Darwin could, just to interrupt, you don't think Darwin could feel some aftershocks over the next couple of days?
Like I said, the aftershocks are usually quite a bit smaller than the major earthquake that first happened. So it's only the really big events that would be felt as far away as Darwin. But the alertness has to come from the fact that, there could be events that occur afterwards for up to a few weeks.
Professor Kranendonk, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kenny. Have a good afternoon.